the previous video, I was talking about the use of the elbows, and like I said, there's a million things you can do with the elbows. I'm just trying to open people's minds. I go into some of the more formal stuff in the Down and Dirty course, but also there's the use of the knees. And holy cow, right? Like anyone who's wrestled, you know what I'm going to say. Catching a knee in the side of the head is not a good thing. You know, one of the reasons why in the early days of, the UFC, that the grapplers, when they would go against people, would just dive right in with no fear of getting kneed. It's because as a grappler, and I used to wrestle, so I know, getting elbowed and kneed is in the head, or kneed in the side, or getting shiners is an occupational hazard. And if you got a problem, with that, you don't belong in wrestling, because it's going to happen. I have never had a match where I didn't get elbowed or kneed or whatever. It just happens. It's just a part of the sport. But the point is, the grapplers, they were able to anticipate the possibility of the knee or somebody turning and trying to do something. And so as a result, they knew how to roll with the punches and absorb it, right? So that's why that happened. In Warrior Flow, when we're using the knees, we use our knees in similar fashion that we use our elbows. In other words, you see this stuff, and it's like I said, when I talk about techniques, what I want you to understand is technique is good stuff. But understand that you make technique work, not the other way around. And I think that's where people get, confused, and they see a guy doing forms and whatever art, karate, kung fu, taekwondo, and they see forms and oh, that's all garbage. No, what you're looking at is something that happens for a microsecond in time and space. And you're looking at, in many cases, especially when you're looking at a form, the beginning and the end of something. Because whatever, a couple hundred years ago, whatever, when they developed that system, nobody was sitting around, with a smartphone filming it, so you couldn't see all the little changes that were going on. So they did the best they could, because there's like 5,000 things going on between this movement and this movement, but you can't see all that stuff. So just be aware that when you're looking at a technique, any kind of technique, try to understand the movement that would have to go into it to make it work. And you'd be surprised that there's a lot of good stuff out there that is workable, even at speed, but you got to develop the body. So in Warrior Flow, we're all about developing our bodies. So when we use our knees not just as a weapon, but also as a tool. In other words, as far as using your knee as a weapon, there's really only so many things you can do with your knee. I can bring the knee up and strike. I can bring it to the side, especially, I can still get my leg up high enough, put it right in the liver there, make it hard for them to like process French fries or something like that. So there's all kinds of stuff. But in Warrior Flow, we use the knees also like a tool. And so when we're using our knees on people, we're using it many times in the same way, like how I showed in the video of the elbows. And what we're doing is, instead of just throwing the knee, what we're doing is as we shift our weight, now because I'm on balance, I have control over the leg. Now I get to pinpoint exactly where I want to put my knee to blast their legs. Me personally, I like to keep knees low unless you're stupid enough to bend over and let me knee you in your face, and I'm just going to take your head off. So when we're using the knee, we're bringing it straight up off the ground and right into people, and we're just trying to shatter people. Sometimes one of the things we do, and just turn a little sideways, is if we can catch you on the side, one of the things I like to teach people is to also go down in a downward fashion to see if you can't pop their hip out of the socket or wrench their knee. The other thing we do with our knees is, a little crouching tiger, hidden dragon, is we use the knee as a tool to break balance or to dislodge of the leg to throw a person's balance off. Especially when we're in close. Grandmaster Karen, he wasn't big on picking his feet up, but he would use his knees and give you some of the meanest Charlie horses because he liked giving people a little sciatic, I guess, because that's just who he was. So as I'm moving here, no matter what I'm doing with my hands, I'm also using my knees like a tool. I can bring them in all different types of places and bring them around. And because your legs are incredibly strong, you really don't need to wind up much to hit a person with a knee to be able to be effective. I see stuff all the time. People ask, how would you do with a grappler just trying to grab your legs? I always say, I don't know, how are they going to deal with me, crushing their skull with my knee? And the reason why people say these things, or they say, well, how could you do this or do that? Is because most people, when they train, they're not training to take people off the planet. I'm sorry. The reason why, there was one video where a guy talked about, he doesn't see much efficacy in hitting somebody, a grappler, in the back of the neck if they're trying to grab their legs. He says, I don't see how that can work. No, it won't work for you because you don't have the moral will to hit people so hard that you sever their freaking vertebra. That's really what it comes down to. So, and I want to make that point. Just like we're using the elbows, I'll show all this intricate stuff so people can get some ideas. But the reality is, when I'm using the elbow or the knee, I'm hitting people with everything I got, with every intention of impaling them. If I'm going to hit you in the knee, for example, I'll just use this side so people can see. If I'm going to hit you on the inner part of the thigh, I'm not just hitting you on the inner part of the thigh. I'm going to hit you so hard that you're going to need hip replacement surgery. It's going to be like that. I'm not playing games. The other thing is, as I hit, it doesn't mean I'm not going to push down and do other things to try to wrench your knee. And because I can feel how you're moving when I'm doing it, I can make the adjustments on the fly. It's just like when you see a guy who's grappling, and he hooks the leg and he okies up. Because you're in direct contact, you can feel that you can make that adjustment at the speed of light, but you got to obviously practice those skills. So when I'm in here using the knees and using everything, I'm just sending everything at people. If I'm using my elbows and the knees, I'm using all that stuff. Sometimes I like to hit people from behind and bring them back so I can send them out of the, take them off the planet from the world of the living and separate them. So when I'm practicing using my knees, I do different things. This is a little high, but I'll just go ahead so you can see this. I like to get into the habit of feeling where my balance is, bringing the knees up, and then positioning them in ways where I'm actually working the muscles in the hip flexors, where I'm developing the level of control. And the reason is just like your elbow, your knee is already a preformed weapon. And as I like to always say, if you got a hammer, how good you got to be with a hammer. So if I got a hammer, how good do I got to be to bring this thing across and hit you with so much force, like you're going to want to die just so I'll stop giving you Charlie horses. One thing I want to say about the knee, I'm not totally against it, but I caution against this. And that is the heathen technique, as I like to call it, where people reach out and they tell you to grab them around here and then bring the knee, and then they practice these things when they're, okay, here's the problem though. And I'm just saying, depending on who you deal with, you grab me around the neck. And then this happens, and then I crush your windpipe. You may need me, but I'm going to tell you, I guarantee you, my groin is probably going to heal a lot faster than your crushed windpipe, and it's definitely going to mess your singing voice up. And all I'm saying is, if you put your hands on someone to use the knee, you better have the awareness that you're also giving your hands up. And so you need to be able to position yourself in a way, whereas, because I'm not saying I would never do it. If I catch you like this and I catch you like this, obviously I have both hands on you. If I can bring your head down to my knee and send you off to the afterlife, I will. But notice I'm positioning myself, whereas hopefully you're not going to make the adjustment fast enough to be able to get your hands or even use your legs and get back into the fight, because I'm also breaking balance. So I just caution people, because, I would be a hypocrite if I said, I don't never put your hands on a person when you're using the knees, because if you're stupid enough, if I'm in here and I catch you by the throat and you're stupid enough to let me get that, I'm telling you now, I'm going to hit you so hard, in your abdomen, we're going to find out what you have for breakfast, because it's coming back out. It may even, some stuff may even come out the other end. So I'm just showing this to give some ideas for those folks who like to use their knees and trying to open people's minds, because how you use your knees in terms of just striking, it's very basic. It's not rocket science. It's not as hard as people think. That's the reason why when people teach in close combat or World War II combatants, the reason they show the move, because it really is an easy thing to do. But just like check that out, and kind of fool around with it and see what you can do with that.